When Kobe Bryant stopped his car on a rainy Tuesday night in Inglewood, he had not planned to stop. He had been driving back from a late meeting and the rain was heavy and the street was the kind of street you pass through rather than stop on, but something made him slow down and then stop entirely, and what he saw on the sidewalk in the pale orange light of a single working street lamp would stay with him for the rest of his life. A woman and a small boy sitting on the curb beside 3 garbage bags and a cardboard box. The boy was asleep against his mother's shoulder and the mother was not crying. She was simply sitting with her back straight and her eyes forward in the particular stillness of a person who has gone past the point where crying changes anything. The question was not whether Diane Harris and her 7-year-old son Marcus needed help. The question was what kind of help and whether the man who had slowed his car on a rainy Tuesday night was willing to do the kind of thing that could not be undone once it was started. Nobody, not Diane, not Marcus, not even Kobe, entirely understood in that moment what that wet sidewalk was. The beginning of Kobe had been in a bad mood all evening. The meeting had run long and the traffic on the 405 had been the kind of traffic that turns a 40-minute drive into 90s, and the rain had started somewhere around Culver City, and by the time he turned off Century Boulevard onto the quieter residential streets, he was tired in the way that has nothing to do with sleep and everything to do with the accumulated weight of days that feel like they cost more than they give back. He had the radio off the way he usually did when he needed to think, and he was not thinking about anything in particular, just driving and watching the rain move in the headlights. He almost didn't see them. They were sitting close to the curb in the shadow between 2 streetlights, one of which was out, and if the boy had not been wearing a bright yellow rain jacket, Kobe might have passed them entirely, but the yellow caught his eye and he slowed. And then he saw the woman and the garbage bags and the cardboard box and he stopped. He sat for a moment with the engine running, watching them through the rain on the windshield. The woman had not looked up. She was staring at a point somewhere in the middle distance with the boy asleep against her and one hand resting on his back. The steady automatic hand of a mother keeping contact even when she had nothing left. Kobe turned on his hazard lights and got out. The rain was cold and immediate, and he walked to the curb and crouched down to the woman's level so he was not standing over her, because he understood instinctively that standing over a person in that position was the wrong thing to do. "Hey," he said quietly. The woman looked at him without alarm, which told him she was past being surprised by anything the night had to offer her. Eyes were dark and steady, and she looked at him the way people look at strangers when they are deciding in half a second whether this is danger or something else. "Are you okay?" he asked. Which was not the right question, but it was the one that came out. She looked at him for another moment. "We got evicted," she said. Her voice was flat, not because she was cold but because she had already spent all the available feeling on what had happened, and what was left was just the fact of it stated plainly. "Tonight," Kobe said. "Tonight," she said. The boy stirred against her shoulder and she put her hand on his head automatically, and he settled back into sleep without waking. "Where are you going?" Kobe asked. She looked at the rain. "I'm working on that," she said. Kobe stood up and looked down the empty street and then back at her. "I have a car," he said. "I'd like to help if you'll let me." She looked at him properly for the first time since he had crouched down, and he could see her doing the calculation that women do in moments like this. The rapid assessment of risk and need and what you are willing to accept from a stranger when the alternative is a wet curb at 11 at night with your child asleep on your shoulder. "What's your name?" she asked. He told her. She was quiet for a moment. She looked at the boy and then back at Kobe. "Okay," she said. Her name was Diane Harris. She was 34 years old and she had lived in the apartment on Arborvitae Street for 3 years. She told him this in the car while Marcus slept in the back seat under Kobe's jacket, which Kobe had taken off and laid over him without thinking about it. Diane sat in the passenger seat with her hands in her lap and talked in the same flat, factual voice she had used on the curb. The landlord had been trying to get them out for 8 months. She said the building had been sold and the new owners wanted to renovate, and the tenants on rent stabilization were the obstacle. She had fought the eviction twice with help from a tenant rights organization. But the third notice had been the one that held, and she had 30 days. And then tonight she had a sister in Gardena, she said, but the sister had 2 kids of her own in a 2-bedroom and there was no room, and she had not wanted to ask anyway because asking felt like the end of something. She was not ready for it to be the end of. She had a job, she said too. Actually, she worked the morning shift at a dry cleaner on La Brea, and 3 evenings a week she did data entry for a logistics company remotely. She made enough, she said carefully, enough meaning she made exactly enough for the apartment and Marcus's after-school program and the groceries and the utilities and nothing else, and now the apartment was gone and enough had become not enough overnight. Kobe drove them to a hotel near the airport. He had called ahead and the front desk had a room ready when they arrived. He carried the garbage bags and the cardboard box himself, and Diane did not argue because she was past arguing about small dignities. There were larger ones to protect. He got them settled and stood in the doorway of the room while Diane put Marcus into the bed closest to the window and pulled the covers up and stood looking at him for a moment in the way parents stand looking at sleeping children. When the day has been hard. Taking inventory. Making sure he was whole. She turned and looked at Kobe. "I don't know how to thank you," she said. "You don't have to yet," he said. And she looked at him with an expression that was not quite understanding and not quite trust, but something moving in that direction. He drove home in the rain and did not sleep. He lay in the dark thinking about Diane's voice on the curb, flat and factual like a woman reading a report about someone else's life because that was the only way to get through saying it. Thinking about the yellow rain jacket and the hand on the boy's back and the garbage bags lined up on the wet curb like a punctuation mark at the end of a sentence that should have ended differently. He thought about Marcus sleeping in the back seat under a stranger's jacket without waking up because children that age sleep through the things that would keep adults awake for years. And he thought about what Marcus would carry forward from this night, not the hotel room, not the stranger's jacket, but the image of his mother sitting on that curb with her back straight and her eyes forward, not broken, just paused. He called his foundation director at 7 in the morning. "I met someone last night," he said. By the time Diane came down to the hotel lobby at 9 with Marcus, who was awake now and carrying the yellow rain jacket and looking at the hotel breakfast buffet with the focused attention of a 7-year-old encountering a waffle iron for the first time, Kobe's director had already begun making calls. They sat at a table by the window and Marcus ate waffles with the systematic dedication of a child who has decided this is the most important task of the morning, and Diane drank coffee and Kobe told her what he wanted to do. He had a contact at a property management company that handled affordable housing in the Inglewood and Hawthorne area. He said there was a unit available in a building on West Imperial that was clean and safe and in Marcus's school district, and the foundation would cover the first year's rent while Diane rebuilt the margin that the eviction had taken from her. Diane set down her coffee cup. She looked at him for a long moment. "Why?" she said. "Because you were sitting on a curb in the rain with your back straight," he said. "And you didn't ask for anything." She looked out the window at the parking lot where the rain had stopped sometime overnight and the morning was gray and ordinary and useful. "I don't want charity," she said. "It's not charity," he said. "It's a year, it's time, that's all, time to get from where you were to where you were before this happened." Marcus looked up from his waffle and looked at his mother and then at Kobe and then back at his waffle. "Can we see the apartment?" she asked. They drove to West Imperial that morning, the 3 of them, and the property manager met them with a key and walked them through a 2-bedroom on the 2nd floor with windows that faced east and got the morning light, and a kitchen with enough counter space and a bathroom with a working exhaust fan, which Diane checked specifically, and Kobe noticed her checking and understood that this was a woman who had learned to look for the things that actually matter rather than the things that are supposed to matter. Marcus ran from room to room the way children test a space with their bodies before their minds have caught up, and then stood in the doorway of the smaller bedroom and said this one, and Diane stood in the kitchen with her hands on the counter and looked out the east-facing window at the morning light. "Okay," she said. "They moved in that weekend." Kobe's team arranged a truck and 2 men who carried everything efficiently and without comment, and by Sunday evening the garbage bags had been unpacked and the cardboard box had been broken down and put in the recycling, and Diane's furniture, which had been in storage at her sister's place, had been retrieved and arranged, and the apartment looked like a place where people lived rather than a place where people had just arrived. Kobe came by that Sunday evening with Marcus's school supplies for the week ahead because Marcus had mentioned at breakfast that his backpack had been in one of the garbage bags that got wet and some of his things had been ruined, and Kobe had remembered this the way he remembered things that mattered without trying to. Marcus answered the door and looked at the backpack, which was new, and read and looked at Kobe and said, "Is that for me?" And Kobe said, "It is," and Marcus took it with both hands and turned it over, examining it with the seriousness of a 7-year-old assessing a significant acquisition. And then he said thank you very carefully, the way children say it when they mean it and have been taught that meaning it is the part that counts. Diane stood behind him in the doorway and looked at Kobe with an expression he had not seen on her face before, something that was not quite relief and not quite gratitude, but the specific look of a person who has been allowed to exhale after holding their breath for longer than they knew. "Come in," she said. He stayed for an hour and they talked at the kitchen table while Marcus did homework at the counter with the focused diligence of a boy who had decided that school was the thing he could control and therefore the thing he would take seriously. And Diane told him about her job history and the data entry work and a certificate program in accounting. She had started 2 years ago and stopped when the hours became impossible, and Kobe listened, and when she finished he said, "Finish it." She looked at him. "The certificate program," he said. "Finish it. The foundation has a partnership with a workforce development organization that can help with the fees and the scheduling, and when you're done there are 3 companies we work with that are specifically looking for people with that background." Diane was quiet for a long moment. She looked at her son at the counter and then back at Kobe. "You don't even know if I'm any good," she said. "You sat on a wet curb at 11 at night and kept your back straight," he said. "I know enough." 18 months later, Diane Harris completed her accounting certificate and accepted a position with a mid-size logistics firm in El Segundo. The salary was 41% higher than her combined income from the dry cleaner and the remote data entry work, and the hours meant she was home when Marcus got out of school. Marcus was 9 by then and had joined the Foundation's youth basketball program, and was, according to his coach, attentive, coachable, and possessed of an instinct for the game that coaches describe as either natural or the product of a mother who had shown him by example what it looked like to keep your footing when the ground gave way. If this story moved you, drop your city and country in the comments below. We want to know where you are watching from and if you believe that stopping when you could keep driving is always worth it. Please hit that like button and subscribe. Click the video on your screen right now for another story that will stay with you. The building on West Imperial had 22 other units, and over the course of Diane's first year there she came to know most of her neighbors the way people come to know each other in buildings where the walls are not thick enough for complete privacy and the laundry room is shared and the parking is tight. There was an older woman named Mrs. Pettigrew on the 3rd floor who watched Marcus after school on the days Diane's shift ran late and who made him do his homework at her kitchen table before she let him watch television, and who told Diane one evening in the hallway that Marcus reminded her of her own son at that age, which was the kind of thing that gets said in apartment building hallways and means more than it sounds like. There was a man on the ground floor named Gerald who worked nights at a distribution center and who had grown up in Inglewood and who knew everyone on the block, and who one Saturday morning knocked on Diane's door to tell her that the corner store 2 blocks over was being converted to a community garden and they were looking for volunteers, and Diane had said yes before she finished processing the sentence because that was the kind of person she was, someone who said yes to things that made the place she lived in better and then figured out the time later. Marcus planted tomatoes that spring in a plot he chose himself because it was in the sunniest corner and he had read about tomatoes needing sun the way he read about things he decided to take seriously, which was thoroughly and with follow-up questions, and by summer he was bringing tomatoes home in a paper bag and leaving them outside Mrs. Pettigrew's door without knocking because he had decided she would like them but might argue about it. Accepting them and leaving them outside solved the argument before it started. Diane told Kobe about the tomatoes on one of the calls they had every few weeks. Calls that had started as check-ins and become something more like the conversations you have with someone who knows a version of your life that other people don't. She said. Marcus had started telling people he was going to be a botanist or a basketball player, and he had not yet decided which one, and that both options were equally serious to him, and Kobe laughed and said, "Those are not mutually exclusive," and Diane said, "That is exactly what I told him." She asked him once how he was doing. Not in the way people ask when they want a short answer, but in the way people ask when they have decided they want to know, and Kobe was quiet for a moment, which was not his usual response, and then he said, "Some days are better than others," which was the honest answer, and Diane said, "I know what that's like," and they stayed on the phone without talking for a moment in the comfortable way of people who do not need to fill silence with performance. The Foundation's work in Inglewood expanded that year, partly because of what had happened with Diane and partly because of what Kobe had seen driving through those streets on a rainy Tuesday night, the sense that the margin for ordinary people in ordinary circumstances had become so thin that one piece of bad luck, one broken lease, one sick week at work could send everything to the curb, and the question was not whether people had the strength to hold on. It was whether the systems around them gave them anything to hold on to. Kobe talked about this in an interview that year, not mentioning Diane by name but describing what he had seen on that Tuesday night: the yellow jacket, the straight back, the garbage bags lined up in the rain, and the interviewer asked him what it had changed in him, and Kobe thought about it for a moment and said, "It changed what I think stopping means. I used to think stopping was a choice you make when you have time, and now I think it's a choice you make instead of something else, instead of keeping going, instead of assuming someone else will handle it." Diane watched the interview on and she thought, "I am glad he stopped. I am so glad he stopped." And then she put her phone in her pocket and went back to work because the afternoon was full and the work was good and the margin was no longer thin. If this story moved you, drop your city and country in the comments below. We want to know where you are watching from and if you believe that stopping when you could keep driving is always worth it. Please hit that like button and subscribe. Click the video on your screen right now for another story that will stay with you.